Something unusual happened that evening, something so small yet so powerful that people in the hall felt it in their hearts. Nobody expected it. Nobody was prepared for it. And it all began when Keanu Reeves quietly stepped into the charity event where bright lights, soft music, and excited voices filled the room. He greeted everyone with a calm smile as he took his place near the front. Across the room, Sandra Bullock arrived too, wearing a gentle expression that made people feel warm just by looking at her. The event was supposed to be simple. Awards, speeches, and special guests. Nothing dramatic. But destiny had planned a different turn, one that would test kindness, reveal character, and make everyone rethink what true respect really means. As guests settled into their chairs, the atmosphere became tense without warning. A small commotion formed at the entrance. Whispers spread from one row to another. Someone important had arrived unexpectedly, someone the organizers admired deeply but had forgotten to reserve a seat for. The person was an elderly, retired filmmaker. He was frail, gentle, and had influenced many lives with his work from decades ago. His presence alone carried history, but he had nowhere to sit. The staff panicked. People watched quietly. Nobody wanted to give up their assigned place because it was a high-profile event where every seat showed importance. Eyes shifted. Murmurs grew. The old man stood awkwardly near the corner, trying to smile politely, though his hands trembled slightly. In that silent tension, Keanu looked over with a thoughtful gaze. He noticed the old man's gentle confusion. He noticed the staff struggling. He noticed how everyone waited for someone else to make the first move. And then, without a single word, he stood up. His movement was calm and slow, almost as if he did not want to draw attention. He walked toward the organizers and spoke softly so no one else could hear him. He pointed toward his own seat and nodded with a peaceful expression. He was ready to give it up completely. No cameras were focused on him. Nobody had asked him to do it. He simply saw a human being in need and chose kindness. The organizers were surprised. One of them whispered nervously, unsure if they should accept his offer, but Keanu smiled gently, removing all doubt. The elderly filmmaker was guided toward Keanu's seat with visible gratitude. His eyes watered as he sat down, holding the armrests for support. The room fell into a moment of quiet, and even though nothing dramatic had been said, the action carried a deep weight. It made people think. It made people feel. And somewhere across the hall, Sandra noticed everything. She had been watching Keanu from the moment he stood up. She saw how naturally he sacrificed his comfort without hesitating. She saw how he reacted with pure simplicity, as if giving his seat to someone was the most ordinary and decent thing in the world. Her heart softened. She always admired kindness, but this moment hit her differently. It was raw, real, and almost invisible to those who were not paying attention. But she saw it clearly, and it touched something deep inside her that she could not ignore. Then a new problem appeared. People suddenly realized Keanu had no seat left. The program was about to begin. The hall was completely full. Guests turned their heads trying to find an empty chair somewhere in the corners. Staff members whispered anxiously among themselves. Someone tried to rearrange chairs in the back, but nothing worked. For a moment, everything felt stuck. The idea that a global star was now without a place in the room made many people uncomfortable. Yet Keanu stood calmly near the side wall as if nothing was wrong. He did not ask for anything. He did not speak. He simply waited with the same peaceful smile. The suspense in the room grew. People wondered what would happen next. Would someone offer their seat? Would the organizers make an announcement? Would the event be delayed? But before anyone else reacted, Sandra stood up. Her movement froze the entire hall. She stepped forward gracefully, her eyes focused on Keanu with a warm understanding that only deep respect could create. She walked slowly, making sure every step showed intention. When she reached him, she offered him her seat with a soft smile. Her voice remained gentle as she spoke in a tone only he could hear. The crowd watched silently. Nobody knew what Keanu would do. He looked at Sandra with gratitude but shook his head softly, showing he could not accept it. His kindness had no expectation behind it. He did not want to take someone else's comfort at the cost of his own generosity. Sandra understood this immediately, and the moment grew even more meaningful because of it. She remained by his side, thinking deeply, aware that the room was waiting for something more. Suspense began to rise again, as the evening took a turn that nobody had predicted. The audience could feel it. Something emotional was building. Something important was about to unfold. The moment felt heavier than before, filled with quiet lessons about respect, humility, and seeing people not for their fame but for their hearts. Sandra felt it strongly. Keanu stood still with his calm presence, and the elderly filmmaker watched with tears forming in his eyes, realizing he had just been given a gift far greater than a simple chair. And in that silent pause, with everyone waiting to see what would happen next, the event changed direction in a way nobody expected. The hall stayed in a strange silence as everyone waited to see what Sandra would do next. She stood beside Keanu, aware that hundreds of eyes were on them, yet she looked calm and thoughtful. Her expression showed a mix of admiration, surprise, and quiet determination. Something inside her understood that this moment was bigger than a missing seat. It was about kindness in a world that rarely slowed down to appreciate it. She knew she could not just sit back and watch. She had to respond in a way that honored what Keanu had done. Keanu kept his gentle posture, not wanting to make a scene or create discomfort. He tried to gesture that he was perfectly fine standing for the rest of the event, but Sandra gently touched his arm as if telling him without words that this was not enough. She whispered something reassuring, something soft that only he could hear, but the audience sensed the emotion between them. They saw the respect. They saw the sincerity. They saw two people who were not acting like celebrities, but like ordinary human beings, choosing what felt morally right over what felt socially expected. The organizers looked worried. They knew the program could not continue properly while one of the main guests stood without a seat. Two staff members rushed toward the back area, checking chairs, adjusting rows, trying to create space, but nothing worked. The hall was filled beyond its usual capacity because of the unexpected attendees. Someone suggested asking a person from the back row to give up a seat, but before they could approach anyone, a low wave of whispers moved across the room. People did not want to appear selfish or insensitive, yet few were willing to give up their place in such a prestigious event. The tension grew quietly, wrapping the entire hall in uncertainty. Sandra could feel the emotional shift in the crowd. She knew people were waiting for a clear resolution, something that would calm the unexpected pressure that had fallen on the evening. She turned to Keanu and saw how he still carried that same peaceful smile, the one that showed he did not regret his decision even for a moment. She admired that deeply. His act had been so natural, so pure, and so unforced that it revealed a truth about him that many people never saw. And that truth moved her more than she expected. As Sandra stood there, she suddenly felt a strong urge to say something, not just to fix the situation, but to make sure the kindness she had witnessed would not disappear into silence. She wanted the room to understand the beauty of what had happened. She wanted people to remember it long after the event ended. She wanted the elderly filmmaker to know that he mattered. She wanted Keanu to know that his gesture touched more hearts than he realized. And she wanted the audience to feel the power of choosing compassion, even when nobody is watching. The decision formed in her mind so clearly that she did not doubt it for even a second. She stepped toward the small side stage with a firm but graceful stride. People straightened in their seats, unsure of what she intended to do. Some leaned forward. Others stopped whispering. The organizers froze completely. Keanu looked at her with gentle curiosity, not expecting her next move. The elderly filmmaker also watched, his hands resting on the armrests of the seat that now belonged to him because of Keanu's quiet generosity. As Sandra reached the stage, she paused for a moment, breathing slowly. She could feel the energy of the room shift again. She picked up the microphone with calm hands. The soft sound of her breath through the speakers made everyone attentive. She looked around at the faces watching her, then at Keanu, who stood near the wall with his hands folded in front of him. He did not expect attention. He did not ask for praise, but Sandra knew the moment deserved to be acknowledged in a way that everyone could feel. She spoke with a soft and steady tone, letting each word fall gently into the silent hall. She said they had all gathered to honor kindness, compassion, and the people who changed lives through their work. She reminded them that the event was about recognizing humanity at its best. Then she explained that they had just seen a real example of that spirit. She did not say his name at first. She simply described the action. She told the room how someone had given up his own seat without hesitation so an elderly filmmaker could sit comfortably. She described how the gesture was made quietly, humbly, and without the expectation of attention. The room seemed to breathe together. People shifted, feeling something warm and emotional rise inside them. Sandra's voice remained gentle, carrying sincerity that touched every corner of the hall. The elderly filmmaker lowered his head, overwhelmed by her words. Keanu stood still, his eyes softening as he realized she was talking about him. He did not expect it. He did not want the spotlight. But Sandra believed giving recognition to kindness only made the world better. When Sandra finally turned her gaze fully toward Keanu and said the words that revealed he was the one she spoke about, the hall erupted in a soft wave of emotion. Gasps, murmurs, smiles. People looked at Keanu with new admiration. Some even felt embarrassed they had not offered their seats first. Sandra held the microphone with calm grace, letting the moment sink in. She told the audience that kindness like this did not need attention to be meaningful, but it deserved respect because it reminded everyone of what truly mattered. The applause began slowly, gentle claps here and there, then more, then louder. The hall filled with warmth as people expressed appreciation not just for Keanu, but for the message behind his action. It became a moment that connected everyone in the room with a shared sense of humanity. Keanu looked down, humbled, trying not to show how touched he truly was. His natural instinct was to avoid attention, but the sincerity in Sandra's voice made the moment feel different. She was not praising him for fame. She was honoring what he stood for, and that touched him deeply. And as the applause continued, Sandra stepped off the stage and walked back toward him, carrying a gentle smile that said she understood him completely. The room watched silently as she approached him, and the suspense of what would happen next filled the air once more. The applause slowly faded, but the warmth it created did not disappear. It stayed in the air like a soft glow that wrapped itself around everyone present. Sandra walked toward Keanu with a gentle smile as the crowd watched, curious about what would happen next. The room had already witnessed one powerful moment, and yet the atmosphere suggested that something even more touching was about to unfold. Every step Sandra took felt meaningful, filled with quiet admiration. She stopped in front of him, close enough for their voices to remain private, but far enough for the audience to sense the emotional connection between them. Keanu looked surprised but calm, his eyes carrying a trace of shyness at all the attention he never asked for. He whispered something soft to her, something only she could hear, but the tone revealed gratitude. He appreciated what she had said on stage, even though he never wanted praise. Sandra gently placed a hand on his arm, a small gesture that spoke louder than any words. It showed support, respect, and a shared understanding that kindness deserved to be seen. The audience watched quietly, and even though they could not hear the conversation, they felt the sincerity between them. Before either of them could say more, one of the event organizers approached nervously. He apologized to Keanu with genuine discomfort. The situation had become more complicated than expected, and he felt responsible. He tried to offer a temporary seat near the technical booth at the far back of the hall. It was not ideal, it was not comfortable, and it definitely did not match the importance of the guests at the front. The organizer spoke quickly, trying to fix what felt like a disappointing solution. But Keanu smiled kindly, showing no frustration, no ego, and no irritation. He simply nodded as if the offer was perfectly fine. Sandra saw this and felt her heart pull in two directions. She admired his humility so deeply, yet she also knew he deserved better. She could not accept the idea of him sitting in a corner far away while the event continued at the front. It felt unfair. It felt wrong. And she knew that even though he did not care about comfort, she cared about the message. She cared about honoring the moment. She wanted it to reflect the goodness he had shown. She took a slow breath and looked around the hall, searching for a solution that would respect his kindness while also reflecting her own sense of fairness. That was when something unexpected happened. A woman from the second row suddenly stood up. She was not famous, she was not a speaker. She was simply an audience member who had been moved by what she witnessed. She raised her hand and gently said she would like to offer her seat to Keanu. Her voice trembled slightly, revealing how emotional she felt. People turned to look at her, surprised by her courage. Then someone else stood, then another. Soon, an entire row of guests stood up one by one, offering their seats with soft smiles. The hall shifted dramatically. It was no longer just Keanu's gesture that filled the room with kindness. It became a chain reaction. His action inspired others to act, to move, to respond with generosity. And that wave of goodness grew stronger with every person who stood. Even the elderly filmmaker looked touched beyond words, his eyes glistening with gratitude for the young man who had changed the tone of the evening with such a simple act. Keanu looked overwhelmed, not in a dramatic way, but in a quiet, heartfelt way that showed he never expected to cause such an effect. He raised his hands slightly in a polite gesture, asking everyone to sit down, but they refused with warm smiles. They wanted him to have a seat, not because of fame, not because of celebrity, but because they wanted to honor the kindness he showed without hesitation. Sandra watched all this unfold with a soft expression. She felt her chest tighten with emotion at the beautiful ripple effect spreading through the hall. She could see how the audience had united in a way nobody planned. It became a silent message about humanity, about how one simple choice could shift the mood of an entire room. The energy around her felt peaceful, inspiring, and unforgettable. But instead of choosing the seats offered by the crowd, Keanu did something surprising. He stepped forward and gently thanked them, but he shook his head. He insisted they keep their seats. He explained softly that he did not want anyone to feel uncomfortable for his sake. His voice was calm, his tone sincere, and his words carried the same kindness that began this whole moment. The crowd nodded, understanding his heart even more clearly now. The hall grew quiet again, as they returned to their seats with respect in their eyes. The organizers still looked unsure of what to do, but before they could ask again, the elderly filmmaker slowly stood with great effort. The room gasped softly, worried about his balance, but he held onto the armrest and faced Keanu with a gentle, trembling smile. He said in a soft voice that everyone in the hall could hear that Keanu deserved to sit beside him. He insisted on sharing the seat area, offering the empty space next to him where a small decorative chair could be placed. His words were steady but full of emotion. He said that if anyone deserved to sit near him, it was the person who had shown the true spirit of the evening. The hall held its breath. The moment felt sacred. The connection between the elderly filmmaker and Keanu touched people deeply. Sandra felt tears prickle at the back of her eyes as she watched the tenderness of the gesture unfold. She stepped closer to Keanu, standing beside him, ready to support the moment if needed. And Keanu, humbled and moved, whispered a sincere thank you before slowly walking toward the front again. But with an expression that showed he still felt the choice belonged to everyone else more than to him. Yet the tension did not end there. Something else was about to happen that nobody in the hall expected. Something that would once again shift the direction of the evening and deepen the emotional impact of everything unfolding. As Keanu slowly walked toward the front of the hall, the room felt heavier with emotion than before. Everyone watched him with quiet admiration, waiting to see if he would finally take the seat that had been made available for him beside the elderly filmmaker. Sandra walked just a step behind him, her presence steady and reassuring, as if she wanted him to know he was not alone in this moment. The soft lights reflected off the polished floor, casting a warm glow around them, making the scene feel almost like a gentle painting filled with kindness and respect. The elderly filmmaker held the armrest with one hand and extended the other slightly toward Keanu in a welcoming gesture. His smile was tender, filled with gratitude and warmth. The organizers quickly placed a small decorative chair beside him, enough for Keanu to sit comfortably without disturbing the original setup. It looked simple but meaningful, as if it had been waiting for this exact moment all along. The entire hall stayed silent, letting the sincerity of the scene take full shape. Keanu bowed his head slightly and thanked the elderly filmmaker again. He slowly began lowering himself into the seat, but suddenly something unexpected happened. The elderly filmmaker gently touched Keanu's arm and asked him to wait for a moment. His voice was soft, yet it carried a strength that made everyone lean in. He wanted to say something before Keanu sat down. He wanted to share something that had been on his heart long before tonight. The hall remained silent, curiosity tightening the air. Only the soft hum of distant lights and the quiet breathing of the audience filled the room. Sandra stood near them, her hands folded in front of her, sensing that something important was about to be revealed. She watched closely, her eyes focused and understanding, ready to support whatever came next. The elderly filmmaker began speaking slowly, choosing each word with care. He told the room that he had watched the film industry for many years. He had seen actors who chased attention and praise, and he had seen others who worked quietly with dignity. Then he looked directly at Keanu and said that true greatness never needs a spotlight. It reveals itself in small actions, in moments when no one is supposed to be watching. He said that Keanu had reminded him of something he believed deeply when he was young, something he had forgotten over time. That kindness is not a gesture for the world, but a reflection of who we are inside. His words created a ripple of emotion through the audience. People felt their hearts tighten. Many of them had come to the event expecting glamour and speeches, not life lessons spoken with such honesty. Some quietly wiped away tears. Even the organizers who had been stressed a few minutes ago now looked moved by the sincerity of the moment. Keanu listened with deep respect, his expression soft and humble. He had never expected such emotional attention. He had given up his seat without a second thought, without imagining it would lead to something so meaningful. Sandra watched him carefully, noticing how he tried to stay composed despite the rising emotion in his eyes. She felt her own heart swell as she realized how rare it was to see someone so humble in such a public setting. The elderly filmmaker continued speaking. He told the room that he had come to the event thinking he would blend into the background, unnoticed. He thought his contributions were forgotten. But when Keanu offered his seat, the simple gesture told him that he still mattered, that his presence still held value. It restored something inside him that had quietly faded over the years. He said that if anyone deserved a place beside him tonight, it was the person who reminded him that humanity still existed in its purest form. The room grew even quieter. People could feel the emotional weight of his words. Many guests looked away for a moment, trying to steady their breathing. It was rare for an event to turn into such a deeply human experience, yet tonight was different. Tonight felt like a reminder of something people often forget in the rush of daily life. Sandra gently stepped forward, her voice calm and soft. She asked the elderly filmmaker if they could honor his words by continuing with the program while allowing Keanu to sit beside him. She spoke with a warmth that carried respect for both men. Her tone held no authority, only kindness. The elderly filmmaker nodded with a grateful smile, then gently rested his hand on Keanu's shoulder. But as Keanu finally lowered himself into the chair, something unexpected happened again. The lights near the back of the hall flickered briefly. People turned their heads. It was not a technical issue. Instead, a small group of young film students entered quietly. They had been invited to watch the event from a separate room but had rushed in because they heard about what happened. They wanted to see it for themselves. They walked closer, their eyes wide with admiration, carrying nervous excitement in their steps. The organizers tried to guide them back, but the elderly filmmaker lifted a hand gently and asked for them to stay. The hall allowed it. The students stood together, watching the scene with deep respect. One of them stepped forward and said that they came because they wanted to learn not only filmmaking, but also humility. They said that seeing Keanu's act had inspired them and taught them more than any lecture could. Their voices trembled slightly, revealing how emotional and genuine their admiration truly was. The audience grew emotional again. The ripple effect of kindness had now spread beyond the event guests. Sandra covered her mouth for a moment, touched by the innocence and sincerity of the students. Keanu looked at them with gentle eyes, trying to encourage them with a soft smile. Even the elderly filmmaker looked at them with something like hope in his expression. The students asked if they could stay and watch from the back, saying they did not want to disturb anyone. But before anyone could answer, Sandra gently stepped forward with a calm confidence that came straight from her heart. She said they did not need to stand at the back. She said they belonged here too. And when she said those words, the hall felt another shift, another wave of human connection, another moment that would be remembered long after the evening ended. But the night was not over. There was still a twist waiting, something that would bring even more depth to the story and make the moment unforgettable in ways no one expected. The hall felt different now, softer, warmer, more human. The young film students stood near the back with awe in their eyes as if they had stepped into a moment they would remember for the rest of their lives. Sandra's words about belonging still echoed gently in the air. They looked at her with deep respect, silently thanking her for giving them a place in a world where they often felt small. The audience sensed the shift too. The event no longer felt like a formal gathering of celebrities. It felt like a space where kindness mattered more than names, where hearts connected more than titles. Keanu finally settled into the small chair beside the elderly filmmaker. The two shared a quiet smile that held 1,000 unspoken emotions. The filmmaker placed a gentle hand on Keanu's arm as if anchoring the moment in time. It was a gesture filled with gratitude, admiration, and something deeper, something almost fatherly. Keanu returned the warmth with a soft nod. He had given up his seat without expecting anything, yet the kindness had come full circle in a way he never imagined. The host stepped back on stage and tried to resume the program, but the energy had changed so much that the usual speeches felt heavier and more meaningful. People listened differently now. They were more present, more attentive. Their hearts were open in a way they had not been at the start of the night. Every word spoken on stage seemed to carry new significance because the audience had already witnessed the true meaning of compassion right before their eyes. But just when everything seemed to find its rhythm again, another unexpected twist approached quietly. One of the students at the back, a young girl with trembling hands, stepped forward and shyly raised her voice. She asked if she could speak. Her tone was hesitant but sincere. The hall shifted again as people turned to look at her. The organizers hesitated, unsure if they should allow it, but the elderly filmmaker gently nodded in her direction, signaling that her voice mattered. She walked down the aisle slowly, as if every step carried the weight of her dreams. Her eyes were bright but nervous. When she reached the front, she turned toward the audience and held the microphone with both hands. Her voice shook at first, but she took a deep breath and continued. She said she had grown up watching films made by the elderly filmmaker, and those stories shaped her childhood and inspired her to study cinema. She shared that her family struggled financially, and she often believed she would never get the chance to enter the industry she loved. But tonight, watching the simple kindness of Keanu gave her a hope she had not felt in years. Her honesty struck the audience deeply. People leaned forward, listening to her every word. She said she always believed success meant being strong, confident, and powerful, but tonight she realized that real success came from having a kind heart. She looked at Keanu with teary eyes and thanked him for showing her that she did not need to sacrifice her goodness to achieve her dreams. She said that his one small action had changed the way she saw the world. Keanu looked stunned and emotional. Sandra covered her mouth again, touched by the courage of the young girl. The elderly filmmaker blinked several times, trying to hold back tears. What started as a simple seating issue had now turned into a moment that connected generations. The audience felt it deeply. They were witnessing something rare, something genuine, something powerful. The young girl continued speaking. She turned toward the elderly filmmaker and said that she always wanted to thank him for the stories he spent years creating. She said those stories helped her through difficult times in her life. She said she once watched one of his old films every night for a month just to feel less alone. Her voice trembled as she admitted she never thought she would stand in the same room as him, let alone speak directly to him. The elderly filmmaker was visibly moved. He placed a hand over his heart and whispered something too soft for the microphones to catch, but Sandra saw his lips form the word "thank you." She felt her heart tighten with emotion. She stepped closer to the girl, gently placing a hand on her shoulder to comfort her. The audience watched in complete silence. There were no distractions, no restlessness, just pure human connection filling the room. After a moment, the elderly filmmaker lifted his microphone. He spoke slowly but with strength. He said that everything the girl felt was exactly why he made films. He said he never cared about fame or recognition. He cared about touching hearts. He cared about changing lives. He cared about being part of moments where storytelling brought people together. He looked at the girl with a kind smile and said she reminded him of himself when he first began. He told her that she had the heart of a storyteller and that she should never let fear stop her. The audience broke into soft applause, not loud, not overwhelming, just warm, gentle appreciation. Keanu and Sandra stood side by side now, watching the girl with pride in their eyes. Everything felt beautiful, like the world had paused to appreciate the goodness in people. But then the elderly filmmaker did something that shocked everyone. He smiled gently at the young girl and said that he had been searching for someone to mentor while working on his final project. He turned to her and asked if she would like to join him as an assistant. Her eyes widened in disbelief. She covered her mouth, unable to speak. Sandra gasped softly. Keanu looked stunned. The hall erupted in emotional murmurs. The girl finally let out a shaky yes as tears streamed down her cheeks. The elderly filmmaker opened his arms, and she walked into a gentle embrace. The moment felt like a dream coming true right in front of everyone. The whole hall stood and clapped, touched deeply by how kindness had created a new path for someone who needed it the most. It was the perfect twist, unexpected, emotional, unforgettable. But the night was still not over. There was one last moment waiting to unfold, one final gesture filled with meaning, one ending that would melt every heart in the room and bring the entire story together with beauty, respect, and kindness. The applause for the young girl slowly softened, but the feeling it left in the room stayed strong, like a warm echo that refused to fade. People wiped their eyes, exchanged small smiles with those beside them, and held on to the emotion that had filled the hall. The elderly filmmaker remained seated with the girl standing proudly beside him, still overwhelmed by everything that had happened. It was easy to see that her life had changed completely in a matter of minutes. She kept glancing at Keanu and Sandra with deep gratitude, as if their presence alone gave her courage. Keanu sat quietly next to the elderly filmmaker, still humbled by the kindness spreading around him. He never expected the night to turn into something this meaningful. He had only wanted to help one person, but now he saw how that simple act had touched many hearts. Sandra stood nearby, her expression soft and thoughtful. She had watched Keanu for years, but tonight felt different. Tonight she saw something deeper. She saw a man who never asked for attention, yet always ended up giving the world something to feel. She admired him not because he was famous, but because he carried humanity in everything he did. The hosts returned to the stage to continue the program, but even they sensed that the event would never return to its original tone. They thanked the crowd for embracing the unexpected moments of the evening and spoke briefly about the importance of kindness in creative communities. Their words felt sincere, but everyone knew that the true message had already been spoken without needing any script. As the event approached its closing section, a final film tribute was announced in honor of the elderly filmmaker. The large screen behind the stage lit up with scenes from his most iconic films. The audience turned their attention forward as emotional music filled the hall. The filmmaker leaned back slightly, watching moments from his long career flash across the screen. He smiled quietly, his eyes reflecting memories of years spent creating stories for the world. Keanu sat beside him, observing the screen as well, but every few seconds he glanced at the elderly filmmaker with admiration. He felt honored to be sitting beside someone who had shaped so many lives through his work. Sandra, standing not far away, noticed this and felt a deep respect for both men. She knew she had been part of many events in her life, but she had never seen one transform in such a beautiful way. When the tribute ended, the audience rose to their feet in a standing ovation. The applause was long, warm, and filled with appreciation. The elderly filmmaker placed a hand over his heart, deeply moved. He had expected the night to be simple and quiet, yet it had become something emotional and unforgettable. The applause slowly faded as the hosts invited the elderly filmmaker to share a few words. He took the microphone in his trembling hands and began speaking. He thanked the organizers. He thanked the audience. But then he paused and turned toward Keanu. Silence filled the hall as everyone sensed something important coming. He said that in all his years, he had learned one truth. He said greatness is not measured by fame or success. It is measured by the ability to remain human in moments when no one is watching. He said Keanu reminded him of that truth. He said that the world often forgets what true respect looks like, but tonight, one simple gesture had shown its pure meaning. Keanu bowed his head slightly, avoiding the intensity of the spotlight, but his eyes were filled with emotion. The elderly filmmaker continued speaking. He said that the world needs more people who act with heart and humility. He said that the night would be remembered not because of awards or speeches, but because kindness had chosen to stand at the center of the room. The audience grew emotional all over again. Sandra felt her throat tighten as she listened. She knew the filmmaker's words were true. She knew that Keanu never acted for attention. He acted for people, and she admired that more than anything. When the filmmaker finished, he gently handed the microphone back, but Sandra stepped forward before he could sit back. She looked around the room with calm confidence, then turned her gaze toward Keanu. Her voice was soft, steady, and filled with emotion. She said that many people knew Keanu as a talented actor, but very few understood the depth of his kindness. She said that what he did tonight was not a small gesture. It was a reflection of his heart. She said that the world often forgets how powerful it is when someone chooses to be good even when no one is watching. She said that Keanu reminded everyone of that power. Her voice trembled slightly as she admitted something personal. She said that she had known him for many years, but tonight she saw him more clearly than ever before. She said that kindness like his deserved to be appreciated openly, not hidden in the shadows of a busy world. The hall listened with full attention. The moment felt delicate and sacred. Then Sandra did something that no one expected. She stepped toward Keanu and extended her hand to him. He looked at her with gentle surprise, unsure of what she wanted. She smiled and whispered softly, just loud enough for the room to hear. She said that if someone gives kindness quietly, it is the responsibility of others to honor it loudly. The hall erupted in applause. The sound was full, emotional, and sincere. Keanu looked down, shyly touched beyond words. Sandra stepped closer and gently wrapped her arms around him in a warm, respectful hug. It was not dramatic. It was not staged. It was simply real. The audience felt the honesty of it in their hearts. The elderly filmmaker placed a hand on both their shoulders, joining the moment with a smile so full of gratitude that it brought tears to many eyes in the room. The young girl stood nearby, crying softly, overwhelmed by the kindness unfolding in front of her. And in that final scene, surrounded by people who had been touched by one simple act, everything came together. The night ended not with speeches, not with lights, not with awards, but with a reminder that kindness creates kindness. Respect creates respect, and love creates moments that stay in the heart forever. As the lights dimmed, the room carried one powerful message that everyone felt deeply. A simple seat had started a chain of goodness that no one would ever forget.